Hey guys, it's Graham. In the year 2025, I will read my 2000th book. With the number of times that I've reread certain books over the years, I'm sure I'm well over 2,000 instances of having read a book, but that's the thing with keeping track on Goodreads. It helps you to know the number of unique titles that you've read. Speaking of Goodreads, a couple of weeks ago I did that video back when I still had a cold and I was listing off like, hey, here's 30 classics. How many of them have you read? And some idiot was trying to give me heat in the comments. He's like, oh, you haven't read Homer? And I was like, there's a lot of stuff that I haven't read. Well, I was listening to something today and I was like, wait a minute, I have read Homer. What the hell was I talking about? It's possible that I was confusing Homer with Virgil for a minute there because there's always been a connection in my head between the Iliad and the Aeneid. I had a conversation with my friend Porter a long time ago, and he was explaining all that to me. I have not read Virgil or the Aeneid, and I haven't read the Odyssey, but I have read the Iliad. In fact, like a week or two ago, I grabbed a cheap paperback at a like a used book thing. I was like, oh yeah, because I wanted to read that one. Well, then I was looking at Goodreads. It's like, wait a minute, I read this one, and since it logs the dates for you, I read it in 2018. And I started thinking about it. It's like, wait a minute, frick, I do remember because I had seen the movie Troy. I probably saw that in 2006. It was the '04 movie directed by Wolfgang Petersen. It had a really stacked cast. It was in that window of films that was trying to capitalize on the success of Gladiator. But after reading the Iliad, or after seeing the movie and then going and reading the Iliad all those years later, I was like, wait a minute. They pretty much told the story of the Trojan War, except they forgot one thing. What was that thing that they left out? Like, oh, the entire pantheon of Greek gods who were active players in the war, answering prayers for the champions and stuff, and like, you know, observing and meddling. It's like, wait just a damn minute here. I saw the movie, what was that movie called? The Immortals. It came out in 2011. I didn't see it until spring of 2019 when I was at home and on a couch and drugged up recovering from a surgery. And that's a movie that did have like the ancient gods participating in a war. Who was that? That was Theseus was in that movie. It was trying to show that, but there was a lot wrong with that movie. Yeah, it was just Wolfgang Petersen was trying to tell the story without getting into the whole gods of it and just making it a war about, you know, hey, get Helen of Troy, and then like, oh, let's find ways to be remembered, and that's it. All of this started coming back to me today as I was listening to a video on YouTube and then later to a podcast that my brother does. Actually, I'll get to that in a second. The video, I subscribed to the guy, but I can't remember his name offhand. Check the description. I'll link to it there. But the video was specifically talking about the Iliad and the fact that the movie Troy left out the gods because it was put together like by a producer and director and writer for an audience that on both sides of the screen there, like, didn't know how to approach the idea of characters that would serve gods that they interacted with regularly. I would recommend you go watch this guy's video. He has a very compelling assessment of all of that. And he brought up a really valid point that a lot of these Greek legends and Roman legends and stuff, they treated the gods as a very real and borderline tangible thing, and that's reflected in their stories that have persisted to this day. Yeah, no wonder. But if you were not personally somebody who believed in regular interactions with deity, you might have a difficult time conveying that in a convincing way on screen, and that's probably got something to do with why they left it out of the Troy movie. But anyway, the podcast that my brother is doing, it's called Italian Histories, and he is, I won't throw the word expert out at it, but he is very well versed in all of this, and he loves doing research. He's an absolute nerd in the best way. This is my brother who I call him Dr. Italy. Used to call him Dr. Farmer, but he doesn't own a farm anymore. He just pays for one. That's another story. He's got a PhD in political philosophy from Claremont, and he speaks fluent Italian. He served his mission over in Catania in Sicily. And I've probably mentioned this once or twice before, but our grandfather was Jersey Italian. Now, asterisk on that for us is that, he was our grandfather. He was the only one that we knew. He was there. He raised my mom. He was there for our whole lives. He was mom's stepdad. So we're not Italian blooded in the family. He was hardcore. I remember he ended up in the hospital the weekend that my little brother got married. And he was asking the nurse to make sure, he needed a transfusion, and he was asking the nurse to make sure that it was Italian blood. His parents were from Napoli. He was born in Jersey, but he would tell you that he was from Italy. You'd have to press him to get the Jersey out of him, but he's like, well, that's where it all started. We get a kick out of that, but we've had some contact familiarity with Italian culture. All growing up, and then my brother goes and serves a mission in Italy, and then he becomes a PhD, and he took a course in Latin for part of that PhD. He's kept his Italian up, and he just loves reading the history. He's been back several times. He's been to Rome and all of that. And as this personal passion project, he decided to tackle this Italian Histories podcast. He does all of the production and the research and the scripting and stuff himself. And he's done some shorter episodes up at the very beginning of it. It was early 2022 that it launched. And then the last few that have gone live are just a little bit longer. But I remember him mentioning, I was listening to some of the episodes today, getting caught up, and he was mentioning some of the earliest sources that we have for the history of the earliest days of Italy. We're talking just as the Roman Empire was fading out and the modern-day nation of Italy was getting its footing. But he talks about Virgil as a source, and that was the thing that clicked for me. It was like, wait a minute. In addition to all this other stuff, it's I definitely have read some Homer. I have not read Virgil, but I need to. So, stealth plug for my brother's podcast, and he's a lot more organized on that than I am with mine and stuff. He's not just doing it through Spotify or whatever. He built a website, and he's got it all distributed through different feeds and whatever. So if you're curious at all about a near doctorate level analysis of the history of Italy, yet the episodes are concise, do go check that out. We were watching, what was it, one of those Daniel Craig James Bond movies once. I think it might have been Quantum of Solace, where they had to go through some chase through Italy, and it ended up intersecting with some horse race where everybody was flying these different flags, and he paused the movie to explain what that was, and these were all different nation states or something. I'm probably remembering that word wrong, but basically the different provinces or sub-countries that congealed into Italy over time, but they're still very, very well connected to their roots over there. Have you ever seen that meme where it's this guy saying he's here in Napoli, we do not like Christopher Columbus because he was from Genoa. They track all that stuff. But I didn't realize that the earliest of the proto-Italian states was Venice. And that was something interesting about those first few episodes of my brother's show, is he gets into how they faded, and they left the fraying edges of the Roman Empire, and you need material land to call your own to establish a culture, and there were oppressors and enemies on all sides, so they decided to enter the lagoon and become salters, and then manually create something out of almost nothing and build the city of Venice as we know it today. And this was probably 1,000 years before Da Vinci had anything to do with it. It's the year 400 AD. So, I find all of that stuff fascinating. I know a lot of the larger and general movements of European history of the last 500 or 600 years, but now that I've got something of a grasp on that, I find myself wanting to go back more and more and fill in the gaps of what I know less of. And so, hey, focusing specifically on Italy, there's a great place to do that. But you go before Italy, you get to Rome. You go before Rome, you get to Greece. And I've got, like I said, I've got that copy of the Iliad, and I've got other stuff that I want to read. He bought me a copy of Herodotus way back in the day. Geez, probably 09 or 2010, the landmark Herodotus. I've read parts of it. I still haven't finished the entire thing, but I've got that slated for like a slow burn, chapter by chapter read after I do the Iliad, kind of like with what I did with the Silmarillion. Plenty of stuff to read in the coming year, but this is why I keep track of what I do, like both with Goodreads as well as with just keeping lists on a Word document of everything that I've read, because hey, it's possible that I forget that I read something, and then something will click, and I'm like, wait a minute, no, frick, I did read that, and now I need to go back and read it again. So, as always, if you've got a recommendation, feel free to share it. If you've got any thoughts on Homer or any adjacent recommendations or particular translations, it seems like it's one of those stories where everybody's got a favorite translator. Let me know what you prefer. Until next time, drive safe. See you out there.